They always say, she doesn't care, just move on. But what if I told you she does care? What if I told you her silence isn't strength, it's strategy? She's not ignoring you because she's enlightened. She's ignoring you to see if you're still addicted to her chaos. She's watching, quietly, patiently, waiting to see if you'll break character again and text her something desperate like, hey, just wondering if I did something wrong. Congratulations. You just lost the Oscar for emotional dignity, but don't worry. Today, that ends, because we're not here to chase. We're here to ascend. This isn't another alpha male advice rant filmed in a gym locker room. This is Buddhist psychology dark humor and a touch of elderly wisdom that says, if someone leaves you on read, leave them in the past. You're about to learn why your silence isn't weakness, it's your final power move. Why detachment doesn't mean you've given up, it means you've stopped giving away your soul. This isn't just about women, this is about karma, ego, and spiritual rehab for people who've been ghosted one too many times. So sit back, breathe, laugh a little, and by the time we're done, you won't just let go of her, you'll let go of needing anyone to complete you again. Part 1. The Buddhist Law of Detachment. Stop chasing shadows in the fog. Let's talk about craving. Not the craving for chocolate, not even the craving for a quiet nap without your phone buzzing. We're talking about the deep, ego-splitting craving to be seen, loved, chosen. That craving is the ghost of every "why doesn't she want me" moment echoing in your chest. Now let's get Buddhist about it. In the second noble truth, the Buddha said all suffering comes from attachment.
And brother, if you're still checking your phone every 11 minutes hoping she texted, hey, that's not love. That's attachment with push notifications. Let me be blunt, you're not chasing her. You're chasing your own suffering. She became the image your ego tied itself to. The fantasy you poured your dignity into. And now that she's pulled away, you feel like you're unraveling. Not because she's gone, but because your identity left with her.
I once met an older man, 73, sharp mind, gentle heart. His wife left him after 40 years, took the car, the dog, even the Buddha statue from the front porch. He told me, for a month I kept thinking, how could she leave me? Then I realized, she didn't leave me, she left the version of me I stopped being years ago. You see, when people leave, they don't take you. They take the version of you they were attached to. The real you is still sitting there, behind the grief, under the panic, deep in the silence. And silence, when embraced properly, is where transformation begins. Now the competitor might say, silence is power. And sure it is, but not because it makes her chase you. That's just another ego game. Silence is powerful because it forces you to face the one person you've been avoiding all along yourself. That ache you feel, it's not because she hasn't texted, it's because without her attention, you're not sure who you are anymore. So here's the Buddhist twist. Let the woman go, not out of bitterness, but out of compassion, because she was never yours. She was just your latest spiritual lesson wrapped in perfume and timing issues. You are not your rejection. You are not her silence. You are not someone's maybe. You are the sky. She was a passing cloud. Let her float on. And if you're tempted to text her, just one more time, pause. Instead, text yourself, dear self, you deserve peace more than answers.
Chasing her is like running through a fog. The harder you run, the more lost you get. But when you sit still, the fog lifts, and suddenly you can see your own damn feet again. That's the beginning of power, not control, not manipulation, not emotional warfare, just peace. And peace, my friend, is the one thing nobody can ghost you from. Part 2. When you react, you age. Faster. Literally. Let's talk about the price of overreacting.
Not just the emotional toll, though yes, every time you double text, hey, just checking in, your ancestors flinch a little. But let's get serious. Your reactions are aging you, literally. There's science behind this. Chronic emotional stress increases cortisol, a hormone that when constantly elevated starts wearing you down. like an old pair of socks in a washing machine that's been set to betrayal. It shortens your telomeres, those protective end caps on your DNA. Short telomeres, Geschichte, faster biological aging. Translation: every time you check her Instagram story at 2 a.m. with that sinking, "Who's that guy?" she's laughing with feeling, your cells are filing a resignation letter, so here's your wake-up call. She's not just stealing your peace, she's renting space in your nervous system at retirement home level rates, and you're footing the bill. Let's put this in elderly terms. When you were younger, you could bounce back from heartbreak with 3 beers, a haircut, and 1 reckless Tinder date. But now, a breakup can cause acid reflux, knee inflammation, and that mysterious pain behind your left eye. Why? Because older men, especially those over 60, carry emotional injuries in the body. We don't just feel grief, we store it. In our joints, in our sleep patterns, in that little sigh we give when no one's watching. So when you react to her silence by panicking, by overthinking, overtexting, or overanalyzing that last emoji she sent 2 weeks ago, you're not just losing emotional ground. You're donating your vital energy to a person who may have already moved on. Or worse, is just bored and scrolling. And for what, let's be honest. You're not reacting because you care that much about her new haircut. You're reacting because her attention made you feel alive. You mistook the dopamine rush of "she saw my story" for connection. But dopamine, my friend, is a cruel little drug when you're lonely. Now let me share a story. There's this man at the senior center I visit. Let's call him Larry. Larry's 79, wise, witty, recently ghosted by a woman named Denise who found herself at a hot yoga class and never returned his calls. Larry told me every time I almost texted her, I stopped and said, "Larry, is this for healing or for ego?" And 9 times out of 10, he realized it was ego, and instead of texting her, he poured himself a whiskey, sat on his porch, and waved at the trees like a man who had absolutely nothing left to prove. That's emotional maturity, that's detachment, that's aging like a damn samurai. See, the Stoic boys say don't react, the Buddhist monks say observe. And your own aging body. It says, please stop letting your cortisol spike every time she posts a photo of brunch. The goal is not to be numb. The goal is to be wise, to feel the pain without dancing for it, to acknowledge your desire without becoming its servant, to grow older with grace, not with your face permanently frozen in that is she online expression. So next time she triggers, you don't respond right away. Don't even think about typing. Just pause, take a deep breath, and whisper to yourself, every moment I don't react, I gain a year back on my life, and she's not worth a single wrinkle. Part 3. Silence isn't a power move, it's a spiritual detox. You've heard it before. Go silent. It's the ultimate power move. But let's get real. You're not trying to play emotional chess. You're trying to stop waking up every morning feeling like a crumpled napkin of a man. Silence isn't about beating her. It's about unbecoming the version of you who needed to. Silence is not manipulation, it's medication. Here's the Buddhist angle. Noble. Silence isn't just not speaking, it's not feeding the mind's noise. It's the moment you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your worth, and stop sending that 8th text she hasn't responded to, because let's face it, you already said too much. Silence gives you the only thing more powerful than her attention, your own awareness. But warning silence is detox. At first it burns. You'll feel the withdrawal like an addict in rehab. Not from her, but from the story you were telling yourself. That story where she was going to realize how amazing you are if you just said the right thing. The story where she'd come back if you proved you're safe, stable, still here. But what if silence isn't a cliff? What if it's a clearing? I had an older friend, George, 82. His wife left him. No letter, just a calendar reminder that said, I'm done. George didn't beg. He just sat in his garden and watered his tomatoes for a month straight. He said it was the first time in years he'd heard his own thoughts without them being interrupted by someone else's expectations. That's silence. That's detox. That's freedom. Don't confuse silence with sulking. Silence is when you start to hear the small voice inside that says you never needed her permission to exist peacefully. So don't use silence to provoke her. Use it to find yourself again. Because if she comes back, fine, if not even better. Either way, you'll be so full of peace, she'll wonder what monastery you joined. You didn't. You just finally shut up long enough to hear your own soul. Part 4. She didn't reject you. She rejected your illusion. Let's be clear, she didn't reject you. She rejected the story you told yourself about who she was and who you were when you were with her. That's the real heartbreak, not the woman walking away, but the collapse of the fantasy you built around her. You didn't fall in love with her. You fell in love with who you thought she'd be when she finally saw your worth. And when that didn't happen, when she didn't cry and come running back, your ego had a tantrum. A spiritual level meltdown, the kind only cured by herbal tea journaling and yelling into a pillow that smells like her shampoo. Here's the Buddhist spin. What you're grieving isn't a person, it's your attachment to illusion. You turned her into a goddess, and when she turned back into a flawed human, you felt betrayed. But that's not betrayal, that's truth. I met a 76-year-old man in group therapy. Let's call him Hank. Hank said, I wasn't heartbroken because she left. I was heartbroken because I realized I never knew her. I just liked how I felt when she smiled at me. Oof. That's the kind of truth that hits like a slow-moving truck full of incense and karma. So what do you do now? You grieve not for her, but for the illusion. You forgive yourself for needing that illusion. And then you move forward, not with bitterness, but with better boundaries. She didn't destroy you, she just unplugged you from the matrix, and now you're free to see clearly she was never your savior, she was your teacher. What was the lesson? Don't build temples around people who haven't even swept their own floors. Let her go, not because she's awful, but because she's real. And reality is enough when you stop worshipping the fantasy. Part 5. The real reason. She hurt you and why it's not about you. Here's the truth nobody wants to hear, especially your bruised, aching ego. She didn't hurt you because you were unlovable. She hurt you because she was confused, scared, or broken. And you happened to be in the blast radius. It wasn't personal, it just felt personal. You weren't the target. You were the bystander who kept offering your heart like a tissue to someone having an emotional sneeze. Let's get Buddhist about it. In the wheel of samsara, people move through life reacting to pain with more pain. Most folks don't hurt others because they're evil. They hurt others because they've never met themselves. They're just throwing emotional boomerangs and ducking when they come back. So why did she ghost you? Why did she pull away? Why did she flirt with you for 6 months, only to vanish like a cheap magician? Because you were safe, and she wasn't ready for that. I once knew a man in his 80s, Frank, smart, funny, thoughtful. He dated a woman 30 years younger who said she loved his wisdom aura, but disappeared after he suggested they plant a garden together. Frank told me apparently zucchini was too much commitment. Sometimes your peace is threatening. Your sincerity exposes her performance. Your stability makes her realize she's still in emotional preschool. So she runs. That doesn't mean you were too much. It means you were too real for someone still rehearsing. Ram Dass would have said it like this. People can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. And some folks haven't even knocked on their own door yet. So stop taking it personally. She didn't hurt you. She was just acting out her pain, and you were the one holding the chalkboard when she decided to throw the eraser. Now you can either stay angry at the child or grow up and walk out of the classroom. The choice is yours, but one path leads to bitterness, the other to freedom, and one less potted zucchini. Part 6. Emotional sobriety. She was your addiction. Let's not dress it up. You weren't in love, you were high. High on attention, high on the fantasy, high on the sweet little dopamine spike every time she said you're different. Sound familiar? Then she pulls away and suddenly you're pacing the room like a monk in withdrawal. Not because she was perfect, but because your nervous system got hooked on the emotional roller coaster. That's not romance, that's chemical dependency in a push-up bra. This is what Buddhism calls tanha, thirst. Not for water, but for emotional validation. You weren't craving her love, you were craving the version of yourself you felt like when she looked at you a certain way. It's not her you miss, it's the high. And now welcome to emotional detox. You shake, you scroll. You consider texting her just to check in, which is addiction speak, for please give me one more hit. But listen, the only way out is through. You have to sit in the discomfort. You have to feel the cravings. You have to stare at the door she walked out of and say, that door doesn't lead to heaven, it leads to relapse. I met an old Vietnam vet named Benny. He said breaking up with her was harder than quitting smoking. At least cigarettes didn't send me selfies. Benny survived both, so can you. Emotional sobriety doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop feeding your loneliness with illusions. You stop calling it love when it's really fear of being alone in a silent house with nobody to notice you trimmed your nose hairs. And when you make it through that silence without reaching for her, that's when your power returns. Not with a bang, but with a breath. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll finally taste your own peace again. And peace, my friend, is the only high worth chasing. Part 7. She thought you were easy to control. Now you're the ghost. Here's a plot twist she didn't expect. You stopped chasing. You stopped texting. You disappeared. Not because you're playing games, but because you finally remembered who the hell you are. See, in the beginning, she thought she had you pegged. You were attentive, available, maybe a little too eager. You replied fast. You complimented her when she barely deserved it. You made her feel like Cleopatra in yoga pants. And she loved it until she didn't. Because here's the thing about emotional control. It only works if the other person is afraid of losing you. But now you've vanished into thin air like smoke from a sandalwood stick. And buddy, she doesn't know what to do with that. She checks your profile. Nothing. She posts a thirst trap. No reaction. She likes your old photo of spaghetti. Still nothing. That silence. It's not passive. It's nuclear. And suddenly she's the one asking questions like, is he seeing someone else? Did he move on? Did he evolve? Ram Dass once said, the quieter you become, the more you can hear. But in your case, the quieter you became, the more she started hearing voices, mostly the ones in her head, saying she might have miscalculated. You're not being cruel, you're being calm. You're not avoiding her, you're avoiding self-betrayal. Because you finally realized you were auditioning for a role you no longer want, the man who waits. Now she's the one wondering what happened. And that, my friend, is what happens when you go from available to untouchable. Part 8. You don't want her back. You want yourself back. Let's strip this illusion bare. You think you want her back. But what you really want is to feel like you again. The version of you who smiled more, slept better, had a little bounce in your step when her texts came in like digital affection wrapped in emojis. But that version of you, that wasn't her doing, that was you reflected through her approval. And when she left, it wasn't just heartbreak, it was identity theft. Now you're chasing her thinking she holds the missing puzzle piece to your joy. Spoiler, she doesn't, she never did. You just outsourced your self-worth to someone with no intention of renewing the lease. Let's go Buddhist here. In the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha speaks of the illusion of self. You aren't a fixed person, you're a constantly shifting river of sensations, emotions, memories. But the moment someone treats you like a fixed object, someone to win, keep, or ghost, you start believing that's who you are. But you're not. You're not the man she left. You're not the man who begged. You're not even the man watching this video trying to understand what went wrong. You're the observer, the witness, the one quietly rebuilding behind the scenes. I knew a retired therapist named Carl. He told me, after my divorce, I realized I didn't miss her. I missed who I thought I was when I was with her. Then I realized I could be that person again without the drama and the gluten-free judgment. And that's the trick. You don't need her back. You need you back, your humor, your depth, your peace, your socks that didn't match but still made you feel charming. So stop trying to resurrect the relationship. Resurrect yourself, because the greatest love story you've ever lost was the one you stopped writing with your own heart. Part 9. Emotional freedom is the best revenge. But don't tell her that. Let's talk about revenge, but not the kind where you slash tires or post cryptic quotes on Facebook like some spiritual raccoon in a hoodie. No, we're talking about the ultimate revenge, emotional freedom. And here's the twist, it's not revenge at all. When you're truly free, when your peace no longer depends on her attention, you become what every person who plays games fears the most, someone who no longer cares if they're watching. And that, my friend, is terrifying. See, she expected you to unravel. She expected a late-night text, a song dedication, maybe a sad meme about soulmates and regret. But what did she get? Silence. Presence. You doing Tai Chi in your bathrobe while watering plants and smiling at nothing in particular. That's unsettling. That's freedom. Ram Dass used to say we're all just walking each other home. But in your case, you were trying to walk her home and she kept ducking into alleyways with men who still live with their mother. So now you're walking yourself home. Emotional freedom doesn't mean you never think about her. It means when you do, it doesn't hijack your nervous system. It's just a passing memory like an old song on the radio that used to break you, but now just makes you nod and change the station. I once met a 70-year-old man who said, "She still texts me every few months to see if I'm alive. I am, but I'm also free." And that's why I never reply. He wasn't being cruel, he was being whole. So let her wonder, let her scroll. Let her ask her friends what happened to you. Don't say a word, you're busy being happy. And that, ironically, is the one thing she never planned for. Part 10. What if you actually see her again? Let's say you're doing fine, you've detoxed, you've meditated, you've even started enjoying conversations with your houseplants. And then boom, you run into her at the grocery store, at a funeral, at the Tai Chi class you swore you'd never attend, but got tricked into by a flyer that promised inner peace and joint relief. Suddenly the past stands in front of you, in yoga pants and regret. Now what do you freeze? Do you pretend not to see her? Do you drop your groceries and run? No, my friend, you smile, you nod, you become the breeze. See, the goal was never to avoid her forever. The goal was to outgrow the version of you that needed her to feel complete. So when you see her, do nothing dramatic. You don't need to prove you're over it. If you have to prove it, you're not over it. Just be still, be kind, be spiritually hilarious. She might try to gauge where you're at. Wow, you look different. I've been meaning to text you. I saw that thing you posted. It was deep. Smile, offer nothing extra. You're not being cold, you're being weathered and wise like an old oak tree that's seen its share of storms and still stands quietly majestic and slightly sarcastic. I once knew a guy in his 60s who bumped into his ex at a farmer's market. She asked, "Do you ever think about me?" He looked her dead in the eye and said, "Only when I pass the hummus." And then he walked off, sunflower in hand, whistling. That's grace. You don't need revenge, you don't need closure. You just need to remain rooted in your peace, no matter who shows up in aisle 7. Because if she sees you again and feels regret, good. And if she sees you again and feels nothing, even better. You've already reclaimed what matters most yourself. So here you are, 10 chapters later, and not one desperate text sent. That, my friend, is growth. You didn't just survive her silence. You turned it into your sanctuary. You didn't just let her go, you let go of needing anyone to remind you of your worth. And that's not healing, that's alchemy. You've gone from the man waiting for a text to the man who smiles when the phone's quiet, from chasing attention to radiating presence, from heartbreak to Buddha in a bathrobe. Make no mistake, this wasn't about punishing her. It was about freeing you, because power doesn't come from control, it comes from peace. And peace begins the moment you no longer need closure, applause, or an apology. Ram Dass would have put it like this: you're not stuck because of her. You're stuck because you thought love required suffering. It doesn't. You're not cold, you're clear, you're not bitter, you're blooming. You're not untouchable because you're distant, you're untouchable because you finally remembered who you are without needing anyone else to confirm it. So if she ever comes back, that's fine. And if she doesn't, bow gently in your mind and move on. Either way, you won. Now go make some tea, breathe, smile at your plants. They never ghosted you.